Good evening. My name is Phil Schomber. I'm the adult programmer here at Hedberg. I want to thank everyone for coming to tonight's Janesville, an American Story panel discussion. Our moderator tonight will be Mary Schweigl. Mary is the host of our nonfiction Knows No Bounds book club. And when the book club decided to read Janesville, an American Story this month, Mary had the great idea of what if we could find some of the people that were featured in the book and check in with them to see what they're up to now. And so that was the genesis of tonight's program. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mary to get us started.
Thank you, Phil. My name is Mary, and in January we started the nonfiction book club, and we meet every third Wednesday at 6 p.m. typically. And in each month, we've all the books that we've read are on the back table there, along with, and you can see it on the form I handed out. I give out similar books to the topic we had discussed that month, and so those books are also on the back table. And then also on the back table is a list of the books we'll be reading for the rest of the year. That bookmark is on there in case you're interested in reading some of those other books with us. Also on the table are the handouts that associate with each of the books as well that I handed out each month. I add in local history to every single book we read, so that each one has the local history tied in, and we've met at several different locations outside of the library, which is typically what we want to do, so everybody gets to know Janesville a little bit better. And then also on the back table is some pamphlets for some of the local charities mentioned in the book. So we have HealthNet and their current needs. That bookmark is on the back table. Just FYI, they are currently transferring over to the new building that is over on Court Street there. And they're not accepting donations at this time, but once they're moved, they will gladly accept any donations that are listed on this bookmark. And then Project 1649, I have two forms on the back table as well about 1649 and their summer wish list. So without further ado, so let's. I'm just going to give a brief description of the book, and then we'll head on into introducing our panel. So Janesville American Story was written by Amy Goldstein and it follows the shutdown of GM plant here in Janesville. It followed 26 different people from the Janesville area who were impacted by the recession and the closing of the GM plant. Ms. Goldstein spoke with auto workers and their families, politicians, educators, business leaders, community leaders, and other workers from the Janesville area impacted by the economic downturn. So today we have for the cast of characters, and over here is Bob Borman. He was the executive director of the Southwest Wisconsin Workforce Development Board and operated the Rock County Job Center. He is currently enjoying retirement. Next is Derry, and she was and still remains a teacher at Parker High School, was the creator of the Parker Closet, which provides clothes, gift cards, and other necessities to high school students who are in need. And then we have Tim, who before working in the Wisconsin Senate for 2 different terms, was on Janesville City Council and the Janesville's Board of Education. In the book, he was in his 2nd term as state senator. He most recently wrote a book about the GM plant called Disassembled. That is also on the back table for you to check out if you have not read that yet. We have 3 copies of that. And then last but not least is Ann Forbic. In the book is introduced as a social worker and co-creator of Project 1649, which is a program that helps address teenage homelessness. She currently works for Black Hawk Technical College as a recruitment specialist. So I'm going to start off with this question. How was your experience with the book, and where are you now? And we can start with you, Bob, and then we can head down to the table.
Well, my experience with the book started when I met Amy at the Job Center. She was in town just to write an article. She did not, at that time, plan on doing a book. And it progressed from there. Currently, I am retired, sort of, according to my wife. I still serve in a number of different capacities. Officially, I guess I'm an old guy because I've been appointed to the State Aging Advisory Council, which administers the Older Americans Act funds statewide. That has led to a couple of other activities where I am working with senior populations in a planning and administrative kind of board capacity. So.
And I guess for me, I didn't meet Amy probably as soon as Bob did. I think once she started to write her book and she started to kind of learn about some of the programs that were starting to be set up to help families that were kind of enduring this trying time in Janesville, she ran across the Parker Closet, and she heard about that and came and tracked me down up at Parker. Not too much has changed. I'm still a teacher at Parker High School. I just finished my 17th year at Parker. The Parker Closet is still in existence. It's even bigger than it was when it first opened in 2007 and 8. We kind of went from a very small little cabinet in my classroom to an actual room about half the size of a normal classroom to house our all of our items. And we originally went from school supplies and clothing and toiletries to all those things. Plus now we have like household cleaner, we have food. We offer bus tokens and gas cards for kids to come in to get to school. We actually have washers and dryers on the school premises for students that need to wash their laundry. And we provide other things like free tuxedos and prom dresses for kids to go to prom. We help them with graduation gowns and that such. And it's been kind of a little bit of a ripple effect because now every school, elementary, middle school, and high school in town has a closet at their school.
Well, I was maybe start with a question for Bob. Do you remember the year that you first talked to Amy? When that was?
I'm going to say it was like 2010. She didn't come in right away. She came a little bit later.
That's probably about the time that I first talked to her. It was probably maybe 2011 or whatever. Talk to her. No, it needs to be one more than.
No, but it's off.
Oh,
That is on. Okay, that's on. Okay.
that's on.
Is that better? Thank you. I thought off was on was off. But story of my life. But as you know, I wrote Disassembled. But what I wanted to say at the start was when I talked with Amy about this book, I really wasn't sure I would ever write any book. Certainly not this one. And then if I thought about writing a book, was going to be about politics, being in government, and then being in the private sector, and sameness, difference, so on. And I fiddled around about doing that, and then I finally wrote that in like 2015. And so I'd already talked to Amy about this, and I thought, well, I wrote my book. So I did what I wanted to do. And then I just sort of became more interested in this issue because my grandpa was worked for Samson Tractor when GM owned it, and then he was working there in 1923 when they made the first Chevrolet. Interesting that Amy points out in the book that there were many. I didn't realize there was a few in Janesville, but there's so many car manufacturers trying to make it be the ones that survived, as like the big three finally did, and she names in the book 2 or 3 other car manufacturers who tried to make it in Janesville. And then GM comes along, and then they don't make it with Samson Tractor because of the farm depression. And funny thing about it is my grandpa then in 1923, he quits. He works at GM for long enough to make a few Chevrolets, and he has a chance to become a custodian in the Janesville School District. And I never got a chance to ask him. He died many years ago, but I'm guessing he sat there and watched all these other car companies come and fail. So who's this GM guys? Why are they any different? And the Janesville School District is probably going to be here for a while. So he quit General Motors to work and worked as a custodian and retired at 75. You can imagine that today. He worked at Roosevelt until he retired in 1951, I think. But anyway, I then ended up writing got interested in, and my dad worked at the plant too. And one of the lucky things about that was the plant would hire the sons of workers there, union workers, to fill in the summer because people going on vacation. They didn't want to hire, GM didn't want to hire new workers. So they could hire kids going to college, and it worked out for both of them. They didn't want a worker in the fall, and this, people like me wanted to be in school. But the great thing about it was the best paying job in Rock County, $3.25 an hour. And it paid my entire way through Whitewater, room, board, tuition, books. I lived over there, all on $3.25 an hour. Now, to make that comparative to today, tuition at Whitewater in 1962 for a semester was $117. Today, it's about $3,700 per semester. So you can see $3.25 went a long ways then. So that all got me kind of interested. But what I liked about Amy is that Amy's book. So I decided also if I was going to write something like this, it wasn't going to be a duplication of her. I would write about other things involving the same topic. And what I found about her book was how she got really involved in lots of people in Janesville, but particularly in those who chose to go take a job at Fort Wayne or Kansas City or whatever, and their lives and what it did to their families and how they worked it out, and whether they commuted or most of them would have an apartment in Fort Wayne. And then, but what really helped was the GM and the union had agreed to switch to the 4 10-hour days, and that turned out to be a great deal if you were a commuter down to Fort Wayne, because you got a 3-day weekend, and made it much easier to get home and keep your family together. But lots of moved down there too. But covering them and covering all kinds of people who were affected in different ways, I thought was what I was most impressed about her book. But I really liked her book. I probably talked to her 4 or 5 different times about it, and very impressed with what she put together.
Oh, hi, I'm Ann. And when Amy called me and said, "Oh, I got your name and I'd like to talk with you and follow you around for a couple of days here and there," I said, "Yeah, I'd be happy to talk with you, but you can't follow me around. Like, that's too many issues with that." And Amy was smart. She'd already called the superintendent and gotten it cleared. So we did end up spending some days together, driving around Janesville, looking in on families, and it was an enjoyable experience. She's a very smart person. Obviously, she wrote a great book, and so since the book ended, I moved out of the homeless liaison position in Janesville school districts and started working as a school social worker at Craig High School. Then I moved to Rockford University and worked there for a couple of years. And I just recently came back to my community, and I'm working out at Black Hawk Technical College now, which I love. So,
Thank you. This one specifically is for you, Derry. What has changed with the Parker Closet? You kind of went over that a little bit. And do you see any area as a growing need in the next couple of years for needs in the closet?
Well, I guess it's, when I first started the Parker Closet, the first year I had 12 kids that used it. The second year, when GM shut down, it jumped up to 32. And then the following year, it jumped up to over 100. And we remained like over 200 kids every year. And that's been holding steady. And it was starting to go down just slightly, and then COVID hit. And so we were able to really help out as, especially this past year being as normal, back to normal as possible in the school district. And now in the fall, I can only imagine it being worse now with the inflation and such going on. The biggest need right now that we have is transportation, getting kids to and from school. So many of our kids, they live quite a bit away. And luckily we have a busing system, but that's expensive to take to and from school every day, even at 75 cents, 85 cents, a trip. And so for a family that can really struggle. So we try to help with bus passes and gas cards to help the students and families get to and from school. So I guess that would be probably the biggest need that wasn't necessarily a huge issue when I first started the program, but now that's become probably the biggest issue we have.
One of our book club members asked, while on unemployment now, can you go to school and have it paid for? Does anyone know the answer?
Sure, I do know the answer to that because I still stay in touch with folks down at the Job Center occasionally, and the answer is yes. The programs have changed. The funding comes from the Department of Labor that goes through the Department of Workforce Development here in the state, and then they allocate resources to 11 different regions around Wisconsin. And it's based on the unemployment rate as to the level of funding that any particular workforce area receives. There's a counseling program. You go in and you do an assessment to identify what your skill interests are, what your employment opportunities then relate to those skill interests, and they will in fact fund you to go to primarily a technical college. They do not normally fund four-year baccalaureate degrees. Department of Labor is intended to get people back into the workforce, and the sooner they can do that, the more they can allocate resources to other people that have a need. The program has changed from the time that I was there, but yes, you still can get tuition paid for. You're allowed to continue to complete the program even if job opportunities come available. They do provide other support services like transportation, books, tuition, all of those kinds of things are fully paid for.
And I saw you lean forward. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, or is that?
I just wanted to say that we do have a lot of students at Black Hawk Tech who come to us, through those programs at the Job Center, and it's really a wonderful opportunity for those folks to be able to get some additional training and really be able to earn much higher wages than just minimum wage.
Is that funded by the state, or is that funded by the former employer? No,
it comes from tax funds through the Department of Labor. Then they allocate it to the states, and then the Department of Workforce Development allocates it from there to the regions in Wisconsin. But it's federal funding.
Mary?
Yeah.
It's related to everything that you do, Jerry, but the one of the measurements of whether Janesville's come back or not is the school district has what's called a free and reduced lunch program, and it is based on household income. I think the number now is around $39,000 of annual household income, and household income could be 1 job, 2 jobs, 3 jobs, depends on how many adults are in the home and how many jobs they have. But children who are in a home with a household income less than $39,000 can get free and reduced lunch. There were 39% of the kids were eligible for free and reduced lunch the last year the plant was open, and it jumped to 51% just a year after the plant closed. And frankly, it stayed there. It's gone as high as 52. It's dropped to 50. So that's not a measurement of everybody in Janesville. It doesn't include anybody my age or anywhere near it. But I mean, it's a measurement of what a lot of homes are dealing with, and why it's so beneficial to have a closet.
Yeah, and the federal government just kind of waived all free and reduced lunch forms since COVID. So the last 2 years, every kid, no matter what their economic level, the kids have gotten free and reduced or free lunch and breakfast. That's going to end soon, within the next year. I don't know if it's this coming year or there's one more year to it. But that would be interesting. And just like every government form that's out there, they're so easy to read and so easy to fill out, right? I've actually sat down with students and their families to fill them out, and it's awful. And a lot of our families just, they don't know how to get through it and to fill out the forms. And so it's really difficult for them. And so a lot of them just choose not to do it. I've also taken a look, and on average, if you take the Parker High School, the 2 middle schools that feed into Parker, and the elementary schools that feed into Parker, on average, right now, there are 73% of the students that are on that side of town that would qualify for free and reduced lunch right now. The highest is at Wilson Elementary School with like almost 98% of their student population qualifying. And then Parker is the lowest, which I don't know how that works. I don't know how there's so many at the elementary school and then a lot at the middle schools, and then it almost decreases. I don't know how that really works and happens. I'm still trying to figure that all out.
What's Parker? Ballpark?
It's like 55, 60.
Well, at least a couple of years ago anyway, Harrison Middle School on the Far East Side was 29%.
Yeah, they're like a pretty affluent.
There's a huge difference depending on what part of Janesville you're talking about the level of low income versus high middle income.
Yep.
Kind of along the same lines, from what you all know, how has COVID impacted Janesville as compared to the GM plant closing? Is it less of a need than when GM closed for like jobs, needs, programs, homelessness, et cetera? Or what have you noticed?
Well, from a teaching standpoint, when GM shut down, jobs were really scarce and employers were hiring adults. So you'd have, 42-year-old moms and 52-year-old dads that were working drive-through at McDonald's because they had to make something to make up for the wages of the plant closing or whatever, part of their job that they lost. And I had high school kids that could not find a job at all. I mean, again, just a simple job, something at McDonald's, they couldn't find. COVID, it's had almost the reverse effect, and students were, at first, they were the ones that were more resilient to COVID. They weren't getting as sick, and they had better immune systems, and they were honestly they were willing to take more of a risk. And we've seen more students work like full-time hours employment along with trying to go to school, or they just have dropped out of school because they're getting so many hours at their local jobs, and they need to help pay for this for their families, or they just really like the money and they're just saying kind of goodbye to school, which is really sad. And there's no one really that's there to try to manage that whole and police essentially that crisis that's going on.
I think it's a little hard to compare in the sense that COVID, and not to take away all the sadness for anybody who lost their life or their family member lost their life, but beyond that, I mean, the GM plant closed. Nobody lost their life because GM plant closed, but the plant's been closed for 14 years, and we've had COVID for 3? So it's a little hard to make the comparison. And the comparison that I look at is what can you make per hour working in a plant? And when the plant closed in 2008, the basic assembly line worker was making $30 an hour, plus health insurance, plus a pension. And that went away for over 4,000. I think Amy used the number 4,500 people. And today, I haven't been in every factory, and I don't claim to be an expert exactly, but everybody that I talk to and learn about, factory jobs are more in the range of $16 to $20 an hour. And usually, and none of them with the level of benefits that GM had. So the only way we were ever going to survive and come back quickly for GM was if we just hit the major big home run and a company the size of General Motors or near its size came to town and took over the building. And that was a long, long shot. And without that long shot, I always thought it was going to be a long haul back when I saw, because not only the jobs and the factory jobs that were available, when you talk about a lot of them not being available, hard to find a job even at McDonald's. They had sort of a cascading effect, because all of a sudden you had lots of workers who were making 30 who didn't either retire or go take a job in Fort Wayne or somewhere. They now were looking for jobs, and they were willing to take a job at $20 an hour in a plant. And so there was, or 18. And then there was, so therefore the people who had those jobs in the plant, there was significantly more competition for those jobs at 16 to 20, which pushed some of them into $12 to $14 an hour. There was that negative cascading effect that hit the city, and Derry saw it, and everybody, all the closets saw it if they had kids in school.
You know, one of the opportunities that I had during the time was to do a number of different media interviews. And I was on the radio one time with a husband of a worker who had been laid off from General Motors, who had the opportunity to go to Fort Wayne. And he was complaining that she was going to be gone from home, and all the inconvenience and the family anxiety and separation and all of that. And he said, well, what are you going to do for us? And there was nothing we could do for them other than to help them identify a new direction in their lives. Something had to change. The $30 an hour job was gone, and it's very difficult for any community to recover from that. But there were other job opportunities out there that they didn't pay that much. They were good opportunities. We were also in a good location with Rockford to the south, Madison to the north, and both of those labor markets initially were pretty, I'm going to say safe. Eventually the recession caught everybody, but initially there were job opportunities north, south, and then emerging opportunities here in Janesville. But it required people to reevaluate what their lifestyle would be, what their buying patterns would be, and all of that had then that ripple impact that just sort of mushroomed. But I would tell you, in my opinion, I think Janesville has recovered better than I originally anticipated. The unemployment rate was down at least a month or two ago to 3.5%. During the course of the recession when GM closed, it was 15%. And so people have made some hard choices, some lifestyle choices, and Janesville, I believe, is a better community long-term because of those choices. And so, while it was a devastating loss to individuals, it, I think, benefited the community long-term as it diversified its workforce, and people worked together to recover. So,
one thing that impacted the community to stay afloat was the fact that Wayne, Kansas City, and their families stayed here because of the time it was really bad housing market. You couldn't sell your house. So the majority of them did that, and then they come home on the weekends. So the currency that these GM workers were making out of town was being spent here.
Mm-hmm.
That was still being spent here. So that was one plus for Janesville because we didn't lose all that revenue. It continued to support the community. So that's one of the things that did impact us and kept us going through.
I would agree with that.
And that actually, that was really important. But what Bob mentioned is really the same thing, is that we have become, or I don't know how long we've been that, because of sitting on I-90, Madison, Rockford, so on, we are a significant bedroom community. I mean, just go look at the housing out along I-90. It's gone up. It's been up there for a while. It's enormous, and the same thing happens. They work there, spend their check here. The problem with that it doesn't get talked about much is nobody in any positions in the city, government, or any other interest group in this can take credit for that. That's an accident of them building I-90 right past Janesville and where we're located. So it isn't talked about, but it's a significant factor in providing income in Janesville earned other places. The other thing was other thing that helped was when the plant closed, there were 2,500 UAW retirees in Janesville. There were several more in every community, 35-mile radius of Janesville. But so they retired with a good pension, 2,500 of them, which then when they became 65 was augmented by Social Security. So the bedroom community and then those 2,500 and their income helped to bolster the community through, what was bound to be a difficult time.
As Tim is mentioning that, I think of a group that is highlighted in the book called CORD, C-O-R-D, Collaborative Organizations Responding to Dislocations. And that group was formed because we all knew that no one agency, one organization was going to have enough resources to be able to respond to the massive need that we were going to experience. And so we got together and we began to talk about how we could collaborate and who would handle certain areas of responsibility, like responding to drug or alcohol abuse. Not every organization needed to do that. Let's identify the best organization and create a referral system so people could go to that organization. The other thing that rankles me a little bit is that it's Janesville, an American story. No, actually it was Rock County, an American story. Beloit was impacted, Milton, Edgerton, Evansville, all of the surrounding communities really were impacted, but they came together to try and work collaboratively to address this particular issue. So.
Do they have any stats on how many smaller companies have started up since, say, 2010? Because a lot of small companies have grown, have developed here.
I don't know the numbers. I do know that one of the responses that we had through the Job Center was to bring in people that could help individuals start up their own small business. And at the time when I was still involved, we had created 100 small businesses. Now, are they still all in existence? I don't believe so, but I don't really have any background statistics on the number that were created.
Between Wuthering Hills and Wright Road, there's a lot of companies out there that weren't there in 2008. So I think a lot of those have been startups since then and they appear to be successful.
See, and I think that going back to the CORD, all of the economic development organizations, whether it was Beloit, Janesville, Rock County, they worked collaboratively and they created a plan and implemented a plan to try and develop small business. they also went after the big hit if they could find it, but they recognized again that there was not going to be one solution that fit everybody, and we had to work across different elements of the economy to try and get people back to work. At the 2009, right after the closure, Rock County had over 25% of the total unemployment in the entire state of Wisconsin. There was no job opportunities for that massive number of people just to transfer from General Motors to some other job. It was going to take a lot of effort to help people identify new opportunities based on their skills and interests. And we did it, I think, pretty successfully. Over the 14 years, again, I think Rock County, Janesville, has recovered better than I would have thought it would.
Back to you, Derry. One of the questions was, do both high schools run a closet currently? And you did answer that. I'm just adding to that. How do you communicate between the closets? If you have enough of one thing, do you send it over to another closet?
No, honestly, that's logistically kind of a nightmare. I think that I think some try to. I know that I'll get an email maybe from Craig or whatever, but I don't. I think again. I don't know if Ann, if you were still around when this. I think someone was trying to start like a communication tree between all the closets. And that was just kind of crazy, because obviously the sizes and stuff that I have are not going to be for like the elementary school kids. And honestly, I mean, I teach and I do the closet, so it's kind of like on a side gig. So I just need to just focus on what the needs of Parker is and so on, honestly, and that's.
You're going to have to wait. Phil's coming.
On the recording.
What I was wondering is, like for 1649, and with the
Closet.
the closets, how do you find the kids? How are the homeless teenagers finding you? How do you? I mean, I know in the book it said that you would see someone who was upset, and so you'd say, well, hey, what's wrong? And then they'd find out, and so then they could go in the closet. I mean, how do you guys find the kids to help?
Did you want to speak to like 1649 first?
I think Derry and I will probably say the same thing. It's because of the relationships that the kids have with their teachers. So a key piece of, getting 1649 and our homeless education program going was going to all the schools. I went to all the schools and I trained all the teachers, about what homelessness looks like. It's not always somebody on the street, right? There's a lot of different faces for homelessness, and also what they could do about it, right? So each school had their own sort of junior homeless liaison, usually the school social worker, who would then get the information from teachers, and then we were able to offer services to those families if they needed or wanted them. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, and as far as like for the Parker Closet, at the beginning of every year, we inform new staff just what the Parker Closet is, what services and what things that we provide, and then any time that a staff member has maybe a concern, maybe the students maybe always tardy to first hour and they don't really know why, or maybe they kind of have a disheveled look or wear the same outfits all the time. But that's not always a thing. That my kids both did that in middle school all the time. So that's not always a sign of homelessness. And again, like Ann said, a lot of the teachers just build relationships and ask questions to the kids and start a conversation, and then we'll get an email like, hi, I think, little Bobby is, really struggling at home or whatever. Or, they said that mom and dad are out of work. Do you mind talking to them? And so myself and there's a couple other teachers, the counselors and the social workers at Parker, one of us will meet with the student just to talk to them and see if, and show them what the Parker, closet is, what's in it, if they would like to take anything. Again, many of the kids do. Some of the kids are like, well, I'm going to go home and talk to my parents first. And we have a little brochure, whatever. No problem. That's, what that is. And usually they come back then the next day or two later. And some just are like, nope. Their pride just will not let them. And that's okay. They know that we're there and, maybe they'll come here and see us eventually, maybe not. But again, it's kind of word of mouth. And the kids know about it now, just from now, all this schools, elementary, middle school, and high schools all have closets now, and so they just kind of know it exists. And sometimes the students will just find us. I'll have a student after school. Hi, I heard that you run the closet. Can you help me? And okay, and we just have a conversation and go from there. So, but it's a lot of just relationship building with either kids that have heard about it and they kind of let their friends know, or from the staff that they get to know students and what their needs are and that their story is.
I don't want to offend the originator of that word, but for anybody who just doesn't know about this, is never in a school, the word closet, I don't know what it means to you, but it means to me that's that door over there that's closed, might be the closet. It's really a store. I've been in the Franklin closet several times. It's a former classroom, and it's very visible. I mean, you walk down the hall, and there is the closet. It's a store. You walk in there, and you got all kinds of things. And so I don't know. I don't think the word closet is somehow misleading to the students, and certainly not the faculty. But I think for anybody who hasn't ever been there to see it, might have a visual of closet like I would have.
Like the one at Parker is about half the size of a classroom. So it's you can
see it as you walk down the hall.
Right. Yeah. And it's kind of it's right by the social studies rooms. So there's classrooms all around, and then it's right there. And then it's locked. So you have to, have someone that has a key to get into it and so on. But yeah, and it's kind of essentially now like almost everything that Echo or Salvation Army provides, we have, or we can get our hands on if needed.
And I'm not sure how involved you are still with 1649, because you moved away for a little bit and then kind of just recently came back. But do you know what this year's current statistics are?
I do, because Tammy emailed them to me today. So she would have loved to have been here, but she had a family obligation. So this past school year, 1,169 students were identified as homeless in Olive Rock County. In Janesville, let's see, that number was 401. The only one higher is Beloit at 548. And those are the numbers. Those numbers are for 2019, 2020. For Project 1649, in 2021, they provided transitional housing to 33 homeless youth, direct case management services to an additional 69 youth. So that means there's somebody who's monitoring them and checking on them and making sure they're okay in whatever situation they've come up with for themselves. And then also provided basic needs assistance to 300 youth. Some statistics about Project 1649, 29% of Project 1649 youth were in foster care. This one is scary. At least 42% of all the female youth had been trafficked. 15% of youth that they worked with were identified as LGBTQIA+. 60%, which I think number is low, honestly, had been physically or sexually abused. And 92% of the students who got the housing have graduated high school or are still attending school. 96% exit to a safe, stable living arrangement. 86% got employment, and 94% increased their self-sufficiency scores. So yeah, so it's been Tammy DeGarmo, the executive director, has done an amazing job with Project 1649. So that was the best decision I ever made, was when the board decided to hire her.
How long has she been doing that?
From the beginning, yeah.
In the beginning, when did it?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask me that. My husband's here. He knows I'm terrible with dates. So,
It had to have been around 2008 or.
oh, it was after that. Yeah.
Well, like 2012, I think.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
They were talking about 1649 from like 2008, but it took a lot to get the funding and all that kind of in place before it actually opened up.
Yep. So now there's the house in Beloit for young women and the house in Janesville for young men. So, and they have, they're fully staffed and everything now. So Tammy's done a wonderful job, both fundraising and getting government grants to help those, help provide those services.
Another question from our book club, but the last one that we got, and I'm not sure if anybody would know this, but they're interested if any of you knew if the suicide rate had decreased, because it was a topic obviously in the book, and how is it now in the COVID era?
I'm afraid I don't know.
Okay. This can also be a reference question at the desk for Rick, and I can figure it out for her another time. And then another question is, we kind of touched on it a little bit, and you can all take a turn if you'd like, but where do you see the future of Janesville going with businesses like Shine coming in? Because Shine was mentioned in here, it's here now, and they're building up buildings and on the south town by the airport.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I think the future of Janesville is pretty bright. I think all of Rock County is pretty bright with the interstate, the rail system. And you see new businesses moving in kind of a coordinated effort on the part of economic development agencies across the entire county. So I think that there will be more businesses created and relocating to the Janesville area in the next, 10 to 15 years. So I see it as a pretty bright future for the area.
What's your take on so many?
I'm sorry?
What's your take on so many signs of hiring everywhere? What is? Do you have any?
It's interesting that you'd ask that question, because on my way in here, I'm listening to the radio and they're talking about where have all the workers gone since COVID and how come we're experiencing these shortages. First thing they noted was that 80 million people in the workforce died as a result of COVID. Add to that people like me who are
Baby boomers.
getting to retirement age and in fact are leaving. And then the replacement of those of us that are leaving the workforce is less than 1%. The young new workers is less than 1%. And the result of that is that there are jobs that are just simply going unfilled, and wages are in fact driving where young people go. In Bayfield County, which is where I have some property, it is now the oldest county in the state of Wisconsin. And the reason is it's like Florida of the North. They cannot find people to do basic jobs, housekeeping, working as wait staff or cook staff. Even the trades are experiencing shortages. The numbers escape me, but I remember back in the mid-2000s, that this was predicted, that the workforce would in fact age and be leaving, and we needed to increase our immigration in order to bring in both skilled and unskilled workers from other companies to take the jobs. We haven't done a particularly good job of that as a nation over the last 10, 15 years. And the result is there are shortages that are just simply caused by people leaving the workforce, dying in some cases, and no replacement workers, which is a 50-year trend of birth rates. So,
Birth rates.
I think Janesville is going to be fine too. I just don't think we can compare the future of Janesville to the past of Janesville, because I don't think we can expect to have a company that brings in 7,000 jobs. I don't think that's going to see that anywhere. I haven't heard of it since any place. So I just don't think that's, I think we just have to, whether we like it or not, the chapter of GM closed in Janesville, and we have to just move on and accept that. And we are moving on, and we just have to figure out different ways, you know, and different jobs that are going to be provided to the next generation of workers. And it's not going to look the same, but it's not going to be bad either.
well, during the early 2000 teens, and don't quote me on any of these statistics, but what was commonly held in the workforce development arena by those of us that were in that profession is that half of the new jobs in the next 10 years hadn't been created yet. And I look at what has happened in technology and education and all kinds of industries, and I don't know what some of these jobs are. I can't describe them. You know, I could always tell you what a machinist did, and a machinist that worked at Beloit Corporation or at General Motors pretty much did the same kinds of things. Shine, I have no idea what skills are going to be needed. And that's an example of a job that just simply wasn't created back then. So the future, again, because of the proximity to the markets. I had the opportunity to have Ken Hendricks on our workforce board, and he always touted that Rock County was within a one-day drive of 55% of the population in the United States. And I always scratched my head and said, no way. But then counted up: Detroit, Chicago, St. Louis, Cincinnati, Indianapolis. We are in a very good location to be a distribution center. We have the infrastructure to be successful at it. Again, I just think the future is very bright in those two particular areas, and they will in fact bring new jobs that haven't even been created yet.
Phil?
I just got a couple of thoughts. I don't want to ramble, but it seems to me like the General Motors site here, why not put solar panels down there? What I read is what business is going to go in there with it? There's pavement there, isn't there? That's left after they demolished it. Okay, so you rip up the pavements there, and then you got all this pollution. All right, my second thought is, now we've lived here 50 years, and it seems to me more than ever, not that it's anything new, but Janesville has become a bedroom community. I mean, a lot of people sleep here, and then they work someplace else. And as was stated earlier, geographically, you can draw a wheel, and it's like we're in the middle, which it seems to me there's some advantage to that. Finally, I think our kids went through the educational system here, and one of the reasons why we stayed here was because the elementary, the junior high, the senior higher, and then they graduated, the two boys from Whitewater. We have an excellent educational system. We have a long tradition of that. What's disturbing in regard to the educational thing is we've had a lot of politicians, which I don't want to get into a real deep discussion about that. We've had too many politicians in the last 5-6 years. They're anti-science, they're anti-education. I don't know, it seems to me if we want to keep up with Russia and China, do we want to be number 3 or do we want to continue to be number 1 or wherever? So I hope we continue to put our money in our mouth where education and science are. And again, I think the site down there at General Motors, I don't see businesses moving in there. That's why I think if it's reasonable or practical, I mean, the future, it looks like to me, not all of it, but it's going to be solar energy, dash, electric cars, and so forth and so forth.
Well, one of the things that you commented on, I find this rather amazing, but you talk about getting rid of that concrete down there. Of all agencies, this is what I'm amazed at. Of all agencies, the Department of Natural Resources in Wisconsin has said you cannot remove the concrete. And the reason why they don't want to remove it is because of what's underneath it. So I would not expect the environmental agency to say, leave the concrete there and we'll act like there's nothing underneath it. Well, there's just a lot of pollution underneath there. And that's why their solution is, well, we'll just cover it up forever. And it will have an impact on the things you talk about, the possibilities of others. So if you want to go there on that site now as a company, you're going to go there and accept the concrete.
Right. It's going to be expensive too. Very expensive.
So we're getting close to our hour time, but just one last really quick question. Did you read the book?
Did I read the book?
Yes.
No, I did not. Of course I read the book. Again, I couldn't not read the book. Amy was on the phone to me talking about the difficulties she had at the very last minute. I mean, this book almost was not published. The publisher thought it was too complicated, as you said, 26 different characters. They wanted her to cut it back to maybe 6 or 8. And they were going to pull publication until she did that. Somehow she convinced them, and so now I had to read it because I had to know, who all these people are. So yes, I did in fact read it. And I thought it was a pretty good, accurate depiction of what went on and the experiences that we had.
I have a quick question for Derry. Do you know how the twins are doing?
Both Kezia and Alyssa are married. Both have children, and both, I know one for sure has graduated from or with their master's degree, and the other one I think is currently working on a master's degree.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so they're doing very, very well. But I too read the book. I actually read it twice. And I was actually telling Bob this earlier. I teach U.S. history at Parker, and this is the first year I really went in depth from a historical perspective of what the GM recession and GM closing in Janesville was. And so I referenced the book. I talked a lot about the history of it. There was some PBS video clips and stuff that were on that I used in class too. And because the juniors that I had this past year were like 3 or 4 when it happened. And I just thought it was, they just knew oh yeah, I knew that the building was there until they knocked it down. But I was amazed that about a third of all my history classes, they all were impacted by the closure. And they still, whether they remembered through stories, I think mostly, or memory, they remember that time. And it was very interesting because some classes just went with it and just talked, oh, this is what we did and this is what we did. And it was very interesting, but it's always hard for me to like go back and read it because it's like re-ripping the Band-Aid off. It's like that wound is open again. So it's going to be, and it was this time around because it was hard to teach about it. I'm sure it will get easier every year somewhat, but just kind of reliving that over and over again, it's going to be, I think, a little bit difficult.
Yes, I read it when it first came out, and then I went back and kind of scanned it the last couple of weeks for this because this old brain sometimes forgets stuff after 4 years or so. But as to memories and people being still affected by it, the Rock County Historical Society has now begun what they're going to call the Legacies Center. It's something that started out to be the Legacy Center with just focused on General Motors. But they're going to have a Legacy Center, which will be a big part of General Motors. So people's memories will be reminded of this for a long time if they go up there. But I think what's going to be terrific is they're going to go beyond GM. It'll be Parker Penn. You can name other companies, Gilman's, others, Huffshade, Huffcore, and they're going to. Gray's Brewery is the oldest family-owned brewery in America, in Janesville. They'll probably be recognized. So the history of Janesville is going to be remembered very well, I think, by the Historical Society, including the sad memories of what we lost.
So I read it, I think, in a day. I really liked it. I'm just curious about how many of you guys liked it. Like, who really enjoyed the book? I really thought it was a great book. So that's great. I'm glad. It's really important to understand this information, but at the same time, to see how it actually impacts people. That I think is the beauty of a book like this, right? That it's not just numbers; it's real people, and this kind of a book lets you understand that. At a very deep level. So yeah, I cried. But also I felt like nostalgia for a time that I wasn't even born, but some of the history and the way that the employers cared for their employees was really touching to me. And I know that there's still some people out there like that, and I just wish that bedroom communities weren't so prevalent, right? That the people who employed you were also like in your town, if you understand what I'm saying, and we're invested in your well-being and the well-being of the town. So.
And before we leave, Mary, if I could just share some stories, if you will. It amazes me. In fact, Jerry and we were talking earlier. This book and what happened here in Janesville created so much worldwide interest. It just has surprised me, and it surprises me today that we've got another group that is interested in reading what happened. I think that I did 12 to 13 interviews from foreign countries. They sent reporters over here to tell the story. I can't tell you how many newspapers and radio stations. And I think that shows not only the interest, but as people have read the book, they've created, I think, an impression about how well we worked together to try and address the problem. And probably the most interesting story that occurred to me is I got a text from a guy who said, "Do you remember me?" And I looked at the name and I said, holy cow, this was the guy that lived next door to me freshman year in college in 1966. He lives in Denver, Colorado. His book club read the book, and we did an interview because they wanted to know, what was the follow-up of some of these things. But the connections that have occurred as a result of this just continue to amaze me. because it's been, 14 years since this all happened, and a lot of us have very short memories and other things that occur. But what happened in Janesville and how we responded to this still has an impact for people that take the time to read through the book and consider, what happened to people. And I think that's the basic element of the book. This is not a story about closure. It's about how people responded and how we tried to help people and how people then were able to benefit from the assistance. It's a human relations kind of story.
Resilience.
Yeah, resilience.
I'm going to call out a good deed. Bob was, an incredibly busy guy during that time. I had talked to him and just mentioned that I couldn't get a mattress where it needed to go. And he took care of it, which was an incredibly kind thing to do. So I always remember that. That's just such a great example of, how we work together to try to take care of the community.
And again, this was not just one organization, one agency. It was everybody working together. My wife is Finnish, and the Finnish major network came over. And because they're Finnish, my wife invited them out for dinner. They came back. We invited them out again. And as they were leaving, they said, "Well, how are you doing?" And I said, "What do you mean, how am I doing? I'm doing fine. I got a job. Yeah, but it had to be overwhelming. And you had to feel pressure and stress." And I said, "No, I really did not." And I think the reason I did not is that I had a network of all of these people, all of these agencies, and we were all working for a common good. And what I said is, I'll leave it to somebody else to decide if what we did is right and was in the best interest of not only the community, but particularly the people. And I'm not saying this, and please, I don't have quite this kind of ego, but the Boston Globe said, the great hero of the book is me. And I'm thinking, no, that's not, you missed the point. It was all of us working together. But the fact that they thought that I was the hero was because we were doing something to try and help people get back on their feet and to rebuild their lives. I feel good about that. Yep.
Those come in.
I just want to say thank you to the four of you and to your organizations and to how you helped the community and how you helped the people and how you're still helping the people of Janesville and Rock County. You should be very proud of what you do. And I personally I've helped with certain organizations and things. I do a lot with the Salvation Army. I helped with helping the homeless, which we helped give money to 1649. I've been to their men's house. And I mean, I just want to say how wonderful it is that you came out tonight and to talk to us, and also for everything that you've done.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.